Hello everybody, it's Uncle Matt, and I'm here to read you another bedtime story. And today's bedtime story is The Cremation of Sam McGee. That's something I read when I was a kid. It was written by Robert Service. It's in this version here, the paintings were illustrated by Ted Harrison, and there is an introduction by Pierre Berton. I think I will read the introduction, give you a little history. This poem was copyright in 1907, and the illustrations were copyright in 1986, as well as this introduction by Pierre Berton, 1986. This book represents a happy marriage between the most eloquent of the Yukon poets and the most brilliant of the Yukon artists. Robert W. Service and Edward Hardy Harrison have more than that in common. Both were born in England, both roamed the world, both were caught up by what Service called the spell of the Yukon. No one caught that spell in words better than Service. No painter has captured the particular essence of the Yukon experience better than Harrison. The work of both men is in the Romantic tradition. Service, the outsider who roamed the continent, wrote his best work a decade after the gold rush, and much of it before he'd even seen the Klondike. Harrison, the newcomer, who had served in the army in England, India, Egypt, Kenya, Uganda, and Somaliland, and would serve later in Malaysia and New Zealand, was better able to appreciate the particular essence of the North. His painting style is unique, part Oriental, part Native Indian, part Ted Harrison. In their work, both men caught the color that the native Yukoner sometimes fails to see because he's too familiar with the land and the people. Service's poetry is always more than colorful. Like Harrison's many-hued paintings, it can also be surrealistic. This is especially true of The Cremation of Sam McGee. Service's poems can be hard-boiled and realistic, as in The Man from El Dorado or Clancy of the Mounted, but the ones he wrote in Whitehorse, before he reached the Klondike, have a mythical quality. Both men, I think, are affected by the mystique of the Northern Lights, the jiggling aurora that dances across the sky. These ever-expanded, multicolored ripples, which, in Service's famous phrase, have seen queer sights, are an essential part of the Harrison style. Sam McGee was a real person, a customer at the Bank of Commerce where Service worked. The Alice May was a real boat, known as the Olive May, a derelict on Lake LaBerge. The rest is pure Service. It was his second published poem. The first was The Shooting of Dan McGrew. Service, I think, mourned the fact that nothing he wrote afterwards is ever as famous as these two classics. But, of the two, Sam McGee is authentic Yukon, while Dan McGrew is pure American-style Wild West. It's a poem about a subject that is familiar to every Northerner, the subject of cold and what cold can do to a man. It's interesting that although the color of the cold is usually thought to be blue or white, Ted Harrison's northern paintings fairly vibrate with all the colors of the rainbow. It is as if he is determined to banish cold with these hot paintings. Harrison mixes his palette the way Matisse did, with no regard to conventional rules, and yet the colors do not clash. Oranges and pinks, golden yellows, and chartreuses march side by side in perfect harmony, like the Arctic poppies that grow along the banks of the Yukon River in the ghost towns of another era. There is humor in Harrison's work, as there is in Service's. Sam McGee is essentially a funny poem, and if it's recited with style and verve, it will draw a laugh, as it should. I've never seen Harrison recite Service, but his rendition of Sam Small in a broad Lancashire accent is a classic. So are his cartoons. It is a joy to see these two unique talents combined. They have so much in common, a sense of discovery, a brashness, and a feeling of joie de vivre that is to be heard in the driving force of the service narratives and seen in the dazzling vibrations of the Harrison art. There is, however, one difference. Service fled the Yukon in 1912 for the hot sun of Monte Carlo, never to return. Harrison, who has plenty of hot sun in the colonial subtropics, has clearly put his roots down in his adopted north. For that we should all be grateful. Pierre, Berton, 1986. There is another kind of forward from Ted Harrison. I will not read that. The Creation of Sam McGee. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The Northern Lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Lebarge I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the south to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell. Though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd sooner live in hell. On a Christmas day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold, through the parka's fold it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we'd close, then the lashes froze till sometimes we couldn't see. It wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, and the dogs were fed, and the stars overhead were dancing heel and toe, he turned to me and, "Cap," says he, "I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking that you won't refuse my last request." Well, he seemed so low that I couldn't say no. Then he says with a sort of moan, "It's the cursed cold, and it's got right hold, till I'm chilled, clean through to the bone. Yet, 'tain't being dead, it's my awful dread of the icy grave that pains. So I want you to swear that, foul or fair, you'll cremate my last remains. A pal's last need is a thing to heed, so I swore I would not fail. And we started on at the streak of dawn, but God, he looked ghastly pale. He crouched on the sleigh, and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee, and before nightfall a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I hurried, horror-driven, with the corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of a promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, "You may tax your brawn and brains, but you promised true, and it's up to you. to cremate those last remains. Now, a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. In my heart, how I curse that load. In the long, long night, by the lone firelight, while the huskies, round in a ring, howled out their woes to the homeless snows. Oh God, how I loathe the thing. And every day that quiet clay seemed to heavy and heavier grow. And on I went, though the dogs were spent and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad, and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in. And I'd often sing to the hateful thing, and it hearkened with a grin, till I came to the marge of Lake Labarge, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, but I saw in a trice it was called the Alice May. And I looked at it, and I thought a bit, and I looked at my frozen chum. Then, here, said I, with a sudden cry, is my crematorium. Some planks I tore from the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found that was lying around, and I heaped the fuel higher. The flames just soared, and the furnace roared, such a blaze you seldom see. And I buried a hole in the glowing coal, and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Then I made a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so, and the heavens scowled, and the huskies howled, and the wind began to blow. It was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I don't know why, and the greasy smoke in an inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I do not know how long in the snow I wrestled with grisly fear, but the stars came out, and they danced about, ere again I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I bravely said, I'll just take a peep inside. I guess he's cooked, and it's time I looked, then the door I opened wide. And there sat Sam, looking cool and calm in the heart of the furnace roar. And he wore a smile you could see a mile, and he said, Please close that door. It's fine in here, but I greatly fear you'll let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plum Tree down in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warm. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they have ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Labarge I cremated Sam McGee. And that's all the time we have for Uncle Matt's bedtime story. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.